Now, I've used this shoe for every single run this week, racking up 100 miles. So in this video, I'm gonna break down my full experience with the shoe. We'll dive deep into the ride, the fit, the feel, the upper, the general vibe, and whether or not this shoe is going to be good for your rotation. Now, before we get into it today, if you're looking for a new running shoe and you are not sure if the Speed 4 is the right shoe for you, go ahead to Supwell and check out our shoe matcher tool where you answer 5 questions and we'll match you with the best shoe for you. So you can go in there, put in what type of shoe you're looking for, whether you want a daily trainer, an up-tempo shoe, a race day shoe, whether you like your shoes soft or firm, and we'll match you with the best shoe for you. So it's live on supwell.io right now. You can also find the best running shoe deals in the US every day, updated daily, and in the Our Picks tab, you can find my favorite running shoes on the market right now. Maybe I'll put the Speed 4 in that tab, who knows? You'll have to wait to the end of the video to see if it is going to be one of my top picks. All right, guys, let's get into it. So in the plated training shoe segment, there are really 2 different paths that a shoe can take. So you have these firmer, more structured, fast speed running shoes like the Adidas Boston 12 and the Asics Magic Speed 3. Then you have a little bit of softer, more forgiving, more everyday running style of shoes, which is what we see in the New Balance SC Trainer V2 and the last version of the Saucony Endorphin Speed, the Speed 3. Now with the Speed 4, a lot of runners were hoping it would be a return to form to what made the shoe so special in the version 2, which I just got into the office a few days ago. And after running in that Speed 2, I understand why it was such a beloved shoe. It's soft, but it's fast, it's bouncy, it's fun, it feels great at a ton of different paces, and it's a super versatile shoe. Now with the Speed 3, one of the key strengths of it was also a versatile shoe, but it could feel a little bit soft and not fast enough for some of us runners who are putting down 6:30, 6-minute, or 5-minute paces. Now with the Speed 4, Saucony has retained much of the identity of the Speed 3. The specs are very similar on paper. They've added a little bit more rubber, but they've kept the same wide base of the shoe and they've kept the same general feel. Alright guys, so diving into the midsole here, it is very similar to the Endorphin Speed 3 with the specs. We still have that 8mm drop, and we also still have this winged nylon plate. You can see this little plastic piece poking out. That's the wing on the nylon plate. And what that wing is going to do is make it a little bit better of a lockdown with the foot, so when you're cornering, you're not getting as much twisting with the shoe like we saw in the Speed 2. This also still has a 100% Power Run PB midsole, and across the Speed 2, Speed 3, and Speed 4, this has retained pretty much the same character. It's still bouncy. It feels a little bit different, which I'll get into in the ride section, but if you love the Power Run PB and the Speed 3, you're gonna love it here. Now with the plate that we're seeing in the shoe, it still is gonna be a very flexible shoe. As you can see, I can bend it pretty much in half. We take a look at the Speed 3 here, same deal. If we look at a firmer shoe with a glass fiber rod setup here, Boston 12, we're not gonna get as much bending, at least in the midfoot area of the shoe. So Speed 4 still is a relatively flexible option. Now, one big difference in the midsole here, which we can see in the Speed 4 versus the Speed 3, is that they've flared out the foam just a little bit more in the back here. They've widened out this very back area and split it. I call it the Hoka hoof here, right? Hoka popularized this. And so on slower paces, it feels a little bit awkward and clunky. I'm not sure if it's actually adding anything other than a design flair. For me, I felt like I could have done without it. But if you do have some issues with stability, maybe this is going to give you a little bit more of a planted landing at those faster speeds. Alright guys, now heading up to the upper of the Speed 4, I absolutely love the upper of the shoe. I said this about the Speed 3 as well, but I think this line of shoes, the Endorphin Speed, has the best uppers on the market. Every brand out there should look at what Saucony is doing with this and try to apply it to their shoe. So it's super lightweight. You can see here there's tons of holes throughout it. It's going to be very breathable, and it also has just the right amount of stretch, so it's not sloppy at all, but it's also not hugging your foot too closely when we're thinking about the volume. The one area where it is a little bit weak for me is the width of the forefoot. It is a very narrow toe box. I had this issue in the Speed 3. It's the same exact fit in the Speed 4. The side of my left foot actually still has some, I don't know what you want to call them, calluses or friction points from wearing the Speed 3 so much last summer. That thing absolutely wrecked my left foot. And this Speed 4 here, running in it for 100 miles a week, that's the only downside I've had with running in the shoe so much, is that little friction point has started to flare up again, and it hurts a little bit when I put on this shoe. Now, if you have a wider foot, they made a version of the Speed 3 in a wider width. They're gonna have it in the Speed 4, I would assume as well. I'm not sure if it's on the Running Warehouse page just yet, but just know that it's likely gonna come to give a little bit more space up here if you have a wider foot. The length of these is great though, it's true to size, and the lockdown was also fantastic. They have these soft, slightly stretchy laces, so you don't have to crank them down super tight to get a good lockdown, and I had no issues with any of my runs of needing to tie and retie the shoes, which is not something that I can say about another shoe that I love, which is the Boston 12 here. This is one of the worst lockdowns in the game. One of my favorite marathon training shoes, but terrible lockdown here. I need to tie and retie a ton of times. So around the back of the upper here, you'll see it's the solid plastic piece here, heel counter, again, holds the heel in place. Now my guy Tim was asking me how this does on longer runs, if there was any slipping with the heel, especially going up hills or varying terrain. I didn't get that at all. Again, one of the best lockdowns. It feels very secure. No matter what run I did, I took this out in wet weather, I took it on the treadmill, I did hill work, long runs, short runs, felt fantastic. My neighborhood is very hilly, and I also have some pretty serious corners I have to navigate in shoes like the Boston 12 and to a lesser extent the SC Trainer V2. I felt like it was a little weird cornering when the uppers don't have that great fit, but this one feels very sure, very easy to navigate. You're gonna get a lot of control up here in the front of the platform. Alright guys, now diving into the ride of the shoe. So after 100 miles in the shoe, I can say that this is still a very fun shoe to run in. Now, I wasn't quite sure after my first run where this would fall into my rotation. I thought it would fit in really nicely into that steady running zone, which for me is about 7:30 to 6:30, so a little bit slower than a marathon pace, faster than a recovery pace. It's that effort where you're just gonna go out there, have fun, run comfortably hard, feel like you could speed up in the back half if you wanted to, but not completely exhaust yourself. So for me in my pace ranges, that's what the shoe has been great at. I did take it out for a fast workout this morning, and at around 6 flat pace, it felt okay. I have some better options in my rotation for fast running, but if you're a sub 3 marathon runner and you want a protective daily trainer, that's gonna be what this thing is awesome for. And if you're in that 3:30, 4-hour marathon range, this will be a great do-it-all shoe. It still has that bouncy character of the Speed 3, but it feels like maybe they've reduced the rocker just a little bit. That's the key difference between the Speed 3 and this. It doesn't feel like it's rolling me along as much, but it still has a nice bounce and pop. Maybe it's something that they've done with the plate because the pop is definitely still there, but I feel like at slower paces, that super unbridled bounciness that I got from the Speed 3 is just a little bit more restrained. So if we're thinking about the changes they made from the 2 to the 3, where they widened it out, made it a little bit tamer, they have tamed it a little bit even more in this shoe at those slower speeds. But when you do want to push the pace, get it down to marathon pace, it still is a nice fun option. Now I mentioned this in my long run video, but as a bigger, more powerful runner, I'm 6'2", 160 pounds, and I run with about a 170 step per minute cadence, probably about 180 at a 10K, 5K pace. But that means I'm putting down a lot of force into these shoes. So when I get this shoe down to a 5-minute pace, 5:30 pace, I feel like Zion back at Duke when he exploded that Nike. You guys ask me what bottoming out means in a shoe, what it feels like, go search the Zion video, just search Zion breaking shoe Duke, and you'll see what it feels like to bottom out in a shoe. Now, I realize that I am on the extreme end of most runners. Most people who are going to be buying this shoe aren't 6'2", running 20+ mile long runs per week. But with that, I've put this shoe through probably one of the most extreme stress tests that it could go through, going 2.5 hours with this shoe and putting down some marathon pace in it. So most of you probably won't have the issue where it feels like it's going flat at your 5K and 10K speeds, where it feels like it's not giving you enough support and cushion at the end of 2+ hour long runs. Because if you are training for shorter distances, if you're taking this up to 10 to 12 miles, and if you're running at maybe a 7-minute per mile pace at your workouts, or even a 6:30-minute per mile pace for your workouts, or you are a much lighter, more graceful runner, this shoe should have just the right amount of support and pop to meet you where you are. However, for bigger, more powerful runners, if you're my size and you're running sub 6-minute pace for some of your workouts, I would recommend going with the shoe like the Boston 12 instead of this, because the ride of that is just going to be a little bit more supportive than we get in the Speed 4 here. However, if we're thinking about one of the key benefits of going for this shoe versus some of those other plated trainers on the market, it's still a very comfortable shoe. Now, right out of the box, I said this shoe requires no break-in, and it keeps your legs feeling super fresh no matter the distance. And that's the key thing, right? Even though it felt like it was going a little bit flat for me at the end of the runs, I didn't feel like my legs were getting shredded, which can be one of the issues you get with the shoe bottoming out. Something like the Hoka Mach 5 didn't feel like it was protecting my legs as much, and I felt like I had to work a little bit more, and my legs were really taking a beating. This thing has done a really nice job of keeping my legs fresh through this 100-mile week. week. I think I've run probably 110, 115 over the past week if we're looking at last Wednesday to today. So this is going to be a great option for a marathon training do-it-all shoe if you want something that's going to be able to do everyday miles as well as speed work and keep you feeling super fresh. So I did take it out for some recovery pace miles too at about an 8:30 minute per mile pace. I didn't love using it for that work. It felt okay. At those slower speeds, even though it is a little bit tamer than the Speed 3, it feels just awkward because of this heel chunk that we have out in the back, and there's way better options out on the market for a true recovery shoe. So for most runners out there, if you're training for a half marathon or even a marathon and you're not my size, pairing this with something like the New Balance 1080 V13, that would be a great two-shoe rotation, and that would be able to do 100% of your runs. You could use this for workouts, for long runs at marathon pace if you're not pushing the pace down to 6-minute range. Then you could use the 1080 V13 for recovery runs and long runs where you don't have any type of workout in there. And then if you add in a plated shoe like a Vaporfly or a Rocket X, that would be an awesome 3-shoe rotation where you could then use that carbon plated shoe for faster long runs and any serious workouts. Now heading out to the outsole, let's take a look at the durability of this guy here. I mentioned this in my comparison last night to the Speed 2, but this Piba foam in general is not great when it comes to durability. You can see that we're taking some chunks out of this back here, about 100 miles in, we're starting to see some wear. Then if you look at the outsole here, I might have to get some B-roll inside for you all, but we have worn it completely through. Now I've heard the Speed 2 was a very durable shoe. I cannot say the same for the Speed 3. I had to retire 2 different pairs of those right before the 300 mile mark, which is not great for me. 300 for me is average durability, so anything that goes below that is below average for me. Gel Nimbus 25 was actually one of the worst when it came to durability, and I've had other shoes like the Saucony Endorphin Shift and the Saucony Triumph 20 that were just absolute tanks, are now still going strong at 350 plus. So this one seems like it's gonna have average to maybe slightly below average durability for me, but I think if you are a 4-foot striker and if you're lighter on your feet, you should get more durability out of this shoe than the Speed 3 because they have added this additional rubber out in the front. Now the rubber in the back is pretty much the same as the Speed 3, but we're seeing a lot more rubber out here, and it was really nice for any wet weather efforts that I did. So the first 3 to 4 days I had the shoe, it was just raining nonstop and I didn't have any dry efforts in it until I think maybe yesterday or the day before. So the grip on this isn't as good as the Adidas Continental or the Puma grip, but it's pretty solid. I didn't feel like I was slipping or sliding too much at an everyday running pace, but when I did want to pick it up into that half marathon or faster zone, I would have liked to have the Boston 12 or one of the Puma shoes on to have a little bit more grip as I was really planting my foot. So that is something to be aware of if you are going to get the shoe and want to run in it during the winter or wet weather months. I would not suggest it for super fast workouts when it's slick. You're going to want to go with something from Adidas or Puma to really have some good grip out there. Alright guys, now in terms of who this shoe is best for, you might be surprised to hear me say this based on my previous coverage of the shoe, but I think this shoe is going to be great for everyone. Now it's just where it's going to fit into your rotation. If you are a smaller, lighter runner, more graceful, this could be a do-it-all shoe. It can do absolutely everything for you. It could even be a race day shoe if you don't want to go for something super harsh. I think this would be a great half marathon shoe that's going to offer a little bit more comfort than a Vaporfly or an Endorphin Pro if you're targeting that sub 2-hour half marathon. Now if you're targeting sub 90-minute half marathon or a sub 3-hour marathon, I definitely wouldn't recommend this as a race day shoe, but for most runners out there, it can do most of your workouts and long runs just fine up to that 2-hour mark. Now, for those of us who are bigger, stronger, more powerful, want something a little bit more supportive, this thing isn't going to be the best for longer runs. For me, I liked it up to that 90-minute mark. So if you want a marathon training long run shoe, I would look to a carbon plated option for any of those workouts. This is definitely not going to give you as much in return as a carbon plated shoe like the Endorphin Pro 3 or even a glass fiber shoe like the Boston 12. And those would be my top 2 choices right now for long runs for those of you training for a sub 3-hour effort and who are going to be working some marathon pace into those runs. And so for those of you who are going over 20 miles, definitely wouldn't recommend this for those weekend runs, but for most of those efforts during the week up to 90 minutes, this should be a great shoe for you. Also, if you do need some light stability in a shoe and you want a plated trainer, this would be a great option. The whole market is actually moving towards more stability in these plated training shoes, and the Speed does a great job at that. Now, you should not buy this shoe if you're looking for something super comfortable for recovery day efforts. While this is more of a daily trainer and everyday running shoe, it doesn't do great at true recovery running paces. I would much prefer having a Gel Nimbus, a 1080 V13, or even something like a Nike Vomero on my foot for those days. And if you want something plated for recovery days, SC Trainer V2 is going to be a great choice for that. But for daily miles, for those runs with strides, for progression runs, for moderate and steady runs during the week, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 is going to be one of the best choices on the market. It's still a fun shoe. It's just when you do push it to those extremes like I have, it doesn't really stand up to some of those other more rugged shoes on the market like the Boston 12 and carbon plated marathon racers. Alright guys, so one of the questions that keeps coming up about the Speed 4 versus the Speed 3 is which one of these is softer, which one of these is firmer. So we are going to do the good old durometer test. 33, 36, 35. Now we're getting 38. This is around 37, 35 in the Speed 3. And then in the Speed 4, 38, 33, 34, 37. So these look like they're pretty comparable. Alright guys, so there you have it. Those are my full thoughts on the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. As always, let me know any of your questions in the comments below, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video.